It started with a photograph, a single image that carried the weight of humiliation, injustice, and fate all at once. In the dim hallway of a courthouse, a black man in his early 50s stood completely still. His name was Judge Marcus Reed. To the world, he was known for his calm voice, sharp mind, and an unshakable belief in the law. But tonight, standing under the pale glow of marble lights, the law felt like a stranger to him. His reflection multiplied across the polished walls, one version of him in power, the other in pain. He stared at the photo on his phone, himself in handcuffs, two laughing police officers behind him, captured less than 24 hours ago. Their smirks were burned into his memory, not because of the laughter, but because of what it meant. His dignity had been their entertainment. 15 years on the bench, countless verdicts, and yet in their eyes, he was nothing but another black man to mock. Marcus drew a slow breath and straightened his tie. "How do you plan to explain laughing while breaking the law you swore to uphold?" He whispered to his reflection. The question wasn't just for them. It was for every system that allowed men like those officers to act without fear of consequence. He reached for his black judicial robes. The fabric felt heavier than ever before, almost like armor preparing him for war. As he walked toward the courtroom, the air seemed to tighten. Lawyers whispered. Defendants sat nervously. The usual hum of justice filled the room, ordinary people waiting for their fates. None of them knew that this particular session would change everything. The bailiff's voice echoed, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Marcus Reed." The room fell silent as Marcus stepped through the double doors, the polished brass handles reflecting his calm but piercing eyes. The atmosphere shifted. People could sense something different, a storm hidden behind composure. As Marcus scanned the courtroom, his gaze stopped on two familiar faces sitting in the third row. Officers Cole Bennett and Ryan Davis, the same men from the photograph. The color drained from their faces. One dropped his folder. The other froze mid-sip, spilling water on his uniform. Marcus took his seat at the bench, his tone steady, every word deliberate. Case number 59842. The State versus Officers Cole Bennett and Ryan Davis. Charges: violation of civil rights, false arrest, and abuse of authority. Gasps filled the courtroom. The whispers rose like waves crashing against walls. The same officers who had laughed while handcuffing him now stood, accused before the very man they mocked. But to understand how it came to this moment, how a respected judge became the victim of his own system, and we need to go back to the night it all began. A quiet drive. It was a little past 11 on a calm Sunday night in Brookfield Heights, a neighborhood known for its manicured lawns and quiet streets. Judge Marcus Reed drove his silver sedan under the soft drizzle that painted everything in muted light. He had just left a dinner with his colleagues, celebrating 15 years on the bench. 15 years of upholding the law with fairness and grace. He tapped his Bluetooth earpiece. His daughter picked up on the second ring. "Dad, it's late," she said with a sleepy chuckle. "I know, sweetheart. Just heading home. How's the final paper going?" "Almost done. 3 more weeks and I'll finally be done with law school." Marcus smiled, warmth spreading in his chest. "That's my girl. 3 generations of Reeds in the law. Your grandfather would be proud. All because of you." "Dad," she said softly. The conversation ended with laughter and love. The kind of simple exchange that reminds you life is good, stable, predictable. But as Marcus turned onto Willow Street, the flashing lights of a police cruiser cut through the drizzle. Red and blue reflections spilled across his windshield. He checked his speed. 5 miles under the limit. No traffic violations. Nothing. He sighed, signaling and pulling over smoothly. In 15 years of judging police conduct, he had reviewed hundreds of cases like this. Now he was about to live one. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car. Their hands hovered near their holsters. Their flashlights shone directly into his face. "License and registration," one of them said flatly. No greeting, no explanation. Marcus blinked against the glare. "Good evening, officer. May I ask what I've been stopped for?" The officer ignored the question. "What's someone like you doing in this neighborhood at this hour?" Marcus paused, recognizing the tone. Suspicion wrapped in arrogance. "I live here, 3 blocks down." The second officer smirked. Sure you do. I'm reaching for my wallet, Marcus said calmly, announcing each movement. It's in my inside pocket. The officers exchanged a look, and in one swift motion both drew their weapons, hands on the wheel. One shouted. Marcus froze. Heart pounding, he kept his voice level. My identification is in my jacket. I'm a judge with the Superior Court, Judge Marcus Reed. Yeah? Said the taller officer with a mocking grin. And I'm the mayor. Step out of the vehicle. Marcus felt the weight of years of legal knowledge pressing on him. He knew exactly how fragile this moment was. He also knew that no amount of titles could shield him from prejudice. He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly. I'm exiting the vehicle. Rain tapped against the car roof as he stepped out, the chill biting through his tailored suit. Without warning, Officer Bennett grabbed his arm and shoved him against the car hood. The metal felt ice cold against his cheek. This is unnecessary, Marcus said quietly. You're violating departmental procedure on non-resistant suspects. That only earned him another shove. Spread your legs. Across the street, a light turned on. A neighbor peeked through the curtains. Mr. Jensen, the same man who waved to Marcus every morning while walking his dog. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered. Then the curtain closed. That, Marcus thought bitterly, hurt more than the metal cuffs that clicked tight around his wrists. When they dragged him toward the patrol car, Officer Davis chuckled. Take his picture, he said. No one's going to believe this one. The flash of the phone camera seared the moment into history, a respected judge reduced to a late-night spectacle. As the cruiser door slammed shut, Marcus caught one last glimpse of his home down the street, the life he built, now out of reach. The sound of the door locking was final, like the echo of a gavel striking against his own freedom. The holding cell smelled like bleach, metal, and regret. Marcus sat on the hard bench in his tailored suit, surrounded by 5 men who all looked like they'd given up believing in fairness. His handcuffs were gone, but their memory lingered. The sting around his wrists, the humiliation that no key could unlock. He'd spent his career watching men come through cells like this. Now for the first time he was one of them. A young man with tired eyes and a neck tattoo nodded at him. What's a guy like you doing in here, old man? Marcus hesitated. Then quietly he said, driving home. That earned a bitter laugh from another man sitting across the room, his voice hoarse from cigarettes. Yeah, that's what they all say. Driving while black. Welcome to the club. Marcus studied their faces, anger, exhaustion, resignation, the human cost of a system he'd helped to uphold. I told them I was a judge, he said almost to himself. That sparked another round of laughter, rough but not cruel. We all judges in here, man, someone said. You the Chief Justice too? He didn't argue. There was no point. In here, titles didn't matter. Education didn't matter. Only skin and assumption did. At the booking desk outside the cell, a female officer named Sergeant Riley typed on a computer. Her face was lined with fatigue, but her eyes flicked up toward him, curious. She frowned at something on her screen, then picked up the phone and whispered. One of the arresting officers, Bennett, noticed. He swaggered over with a paper cup of coffee in his hand. Problem with processing the fake judge? He said loudly, glancing at Marcus through the bars. His partner Davis snickered. Sergeant Riley hesitated. His ID number shows active credentials in the state database. Bennett rolled his eyes. Database must be hacked. You think a real judge drives around at midnight in a suit? Marcus watched her hands hover over the keyboard. She didn't argue. She just looked back at him, then turned away. He had spent his life believing that justice could withstand ignorance. But ignorance had badges, and tonight it also had power. Hours passed in slow silence. The buzzing light overhead flickered. At last a detective entered. Mid-40s, rumpled shirt, weary eyes. His name tag read Detective Morrow. He gestured for Marcus to follow him. They walked down a hallway lined with cameras and cold stares. The interrogation room was small, deliberately uncomfortable. Morrow dropped a thin folder on the table. Quite a story you're telling, he said, circling like a hawk. Judge Marcus Reed, huh? Marcus kept his voice steady. That's correct. Call Chief Justice Harris. His number is in my contacts. Morrow raised an eyebrow. You memorized it? I wrote laws before you learned to quote them, Marcus said evenly. The detective leaned forward. They say you were resisting arrest. I wasn't resisting, Marcus replied. I was existing. That's all it took. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Morrow sighed, rubbing his temples. Let me check something. He left the room. Voices murmured outside, fragments of tension slipping through the door. Words like fingerprint match and judicial database floated in. Then came the phrase Marcus had been waiting for. Captain needs to know. When Morrow returned, his whole posture had changed. He straightened his tie. His voice softened. Sir, there seems to be a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Marcus said quietly. Just prejudice. The detective looked away. We'll clear this up right away. You should, Marcus replied, eyes sharp as glass. Because every second you delay adds another page to the lawsuit your department won't survive. By the time the captain arrived, word had spread. The two officers stood stiffly at attention in front of the desk of Captain Miller, a man whose patience had already worn thin. Family photos and commendations lined the walls behind him, symbols of a man who had once believed in his own department. Let me get this straight, Miller said, his voice low and dangerous. You arrested a man for suspicious activity in his own neighborhood. He was combative, Bennett muttered. Was he? Miller snapped. Because there's no note of resistance in your report. No assault. No obstruction. He said he was a judge? Davis swallowed hard. We thought he was lying. Miller turned his monitor around. On the screen glowed Marcus Reed's official portrait. Harvard graduate, Superior Court appointment, 15 years of service. This the man you thought was lying? Neither officer spoke. Where's your body cam footage? Miller demanded. They exchanged a look. Technical issue, Bennett said weakly. Battery died. Both of you. Miller slammed his hand on the desk. At the same time, silence filled the room like smoke. You have any idea who you put in handcuffs tonight? Miller hissed. The man's presided over half the misconduct cases in this district. He's friends with the DA. He's shaped department policy for a decade. You didn't know because you didn't care. You saw a black man in a suit and decided that couldn't mean success. Neither officer could meet his eyes. When Marcus was finally released, Sergeant Riley handed back his watch, wallet, and phone. She couldn't look at him. Sign here, sir, she murmured, sliding a release form across the counter. He read every word, his trained eyes catching the clause that absolved the Department of Liability. No, he said quietly, pushing it back. I'm not signing away justice. The captain approached, trying for diplomacy. Judge Reed, we want to apologize for this unfortunate— Don't, Marcus interrupted. Your men didn't make a mistake. They did exactly what they were trained to do. That's the problem. He walked toward the exit without waiting for a reply. The glass doors opened, spilling the early morning air into his lungs. It was just past 4. Freedom, but not peace. He pulled out his phone and typed a single message to his law clerk. Get me every minute of footage from Precinct 12 tonight. Full backup. When the door closed behind him, the sound was quiet but absolute. The beginning of something irreversible. The next morning, sunlight crept through his home office window. The same suit he'd worn the night before hung on a chair, wrinkled and haunted. On the desk lay a printed complaint form from the department's website. Too small, too ordinary. He stared at it for a long moment, then pushed it aside. He opened his laptop instead. His fingers moved with precision, typing words that would shake the city's police department to its core. In my capacity as Superior Court Judge, I am initiating a formal inquiry into Officers Cole Bennett and Ryan Davis for violations of civil rights under color of authority. The clock read 6 a.m. He had 10 hours until court convened. 10 hours to build a case against the very people who had mocked him. He wasn't just preparing for justice. He was preparing for war. The courthouse felt different that morning. Usually its marble floors and echoing halls carried the calm rhythm of order. But to Marcus Reed, it sounded like tension held in stone. Every step he took carried purpose. Every face he passed seemed to sense that something was coming. He went straight to the records room, where the smell of dust and paper met him like an old ghost. Behind the counter sat Evelyn Carter, a veteran clerk with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd worked in the courts longer than Marcus had worn a robe. When she saw him, her expression softened, but confusion flickered across her face. Marcus, she said slowly, what happened to you? He didn't answer right away. He pushed up his sleeve. The faint bruises from the handcuffs formed dark rings around his wrist. The sight said enough. Her jaw tightened. They didn't. They did, he said quietly. And they've done it before. I need everything on Officers Bennett and Davis and every complaint, every citation, every word ever filed about them. Evelyn's professional mask returned. She nodded once. Give me an hour. I'll pull everything, he nodded. 30 minutes. As she began searching the database, Marcus sat down at one of the old wooden tables piled high with case files. He'd spent decades believing the law could protect people from injustice. Now he was staring at proof that it often did the opposite. By the time Evelyn returned, her arms were full of manila folders. It's worse than I thought, she murmured. 5 complaints for Bennett. 4 for Davis, all closed. No disciplinary action. Marcus opened the first file. Excessive force dismissed, another racial profiling unsubstantiated. He kept reading, page after page of patterns. The same language, the same excuses, the same invisible victims. He felt something shift inside him. The slow burn of anger, hardening into resolve. I need these scanned and delivered to Lieutenant Harper in Internal Affairs, he said. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. You're going straight through IA? No, he said, looking up from the papers. I'm going through everything. That afternoon, he met Lieutenant Naomi Harper at a small cafe a few blocks from the courthouse. She was known for her integrity, a woman who didn't bend, not even for politics. When she sat down, she slid a small flash drive across the table. Those 2 officers have been a problem for years, she said. 7 complaints in 5 years for Bennett. Davis has 3. They always walk away clean. Marcus took the drive, slipping it into his jacket pocket. Not this time. Harper leaned in, her voice low. You know what happens when you take on the department. They'll say you're emotional, that you're too close to it. He met her gaze. It became personal when they put me in cuffs for driving home, but it was already personal for every person they humiliated before me. She studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. There's locker room footage, too. Bennett forgot to turn off his body cam after one arrest. It's bad. How bad? Marcus asked. You'll see. By evening, he was back in his chambers, the blinds drawn, the air heavy with silence. His law clerk, Leo Ortega, had transformed the polished conference table into a battlefield of evidence. Folders, photos, digital logs, timestamps, all meticulously organized. There's a pattern, Leo said, pointing to a set of records. They target the same kind of people. Young black men, Latino drivers, anyone they think won't fight back. Marcus flipped through the photos. The same mocking grins. The same casual cruelty. There's more, Leo added. The footage Harper gave us. You should see it, Marcus clicked play. The body cam showed the officers joking after a traffic stop. Their laughter filled the speakers, careless and unfiltered. They mocked the man they'd just detained, bragging about how easy it was to make him comply. When the clip ended, Marcus sat still for a long moment. They didn't even bother to hide it. No reason to, Leo said softly. No one ever made them answer for it. Marcus closed the laptop. They will now. That night, he drafted emergency orders for subpoenas and internal record retrievals. Every word was precise, every citation airtight. He wasn't just gathering evidence. He was building a fortress of facts that no one could ignore or bury. At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. Chief Justice Harris, Marcus answered. I assume you've heard. I have, the chief said, his tone a mix of concern and disbelief. You're making waves, Marcus. You should recuse yourself. Let someone else handle this before it turns into a political nightmare. Marcus looked at the pile of evidence on his desk. Faces of victims stared back at him from the files. If I step aside, who steps up? Thomas, it's Marcus, he corrected quietly. And this isn't about me. It's about the system we keep pretending is fair. A long silence followed. Then the chief's voice came back softer. You've never compromised your integrity, Marcus. Don't start now. I'm not, Marcus said. For the first time, I'm living it. When the call ended, he looked around his office. The walls lined with degrees and framed honors felt heavier than before. They were reminders of what he had built, and what it cost to protect it. By dawn, he was still working. He knew the fight ahead would be brutal, but the truth had a way of surviving no matter how hard people tried to bury it. And for the first time in a long while, Judge Marcus Reed wasn't just upholding the law. He was about to test it. By the time the courthouse filled that afternoon, word had already spread. Something rare was about to happen. something people whispered about in the hallways but had never actually seen. A judge was bringing his own arresting officers to face justice. Every seat in the courtroom was taken. Reporters filled the back rows, tapping notes into their phones. Law students stood along the walls, hungry to witness what history might look like. Community members crowded the benches, their faces tight with anticipation. At the front, Officers Bennett and Davis sat side by side in their pressed uniforms. They looked smaller than they had the night before. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by a nervous stillness. The department's lawyer, a man with a slick tie and cold eyes, whispered hurriedly to them. When the door opened and Judge Marcus Reed entered, the room rose in unison. He walked with quiet certainty to the bench. The black robe hung heavy on his shoulders. For a brief second, the courtroom was utterly silent. "Be seated," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried through the air like a force. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the docket. Case number 59842. The State versus Officers Cole Bennett and Ryan Davis. Charges: violation of civil rights, unlawful arrest, and abuse of authority. The defense attorney immediately stood. "Your Honor, we're here for an administrative review, not a criminal proceeding." Marcus looked up slowly. "There's nothing administrative about violating the Constitution, Counselor." The man faltered. "But you can't preside over a case in which you're the victim." Marcus folded his glasses and placed them on the bench. "The Judicial Code allows me to establish probable cause when I am both the witness and the complainant. That is precisely what I intend to do." The room broke into murmurs. Reporters leaned forward. The tension was electric. Marcus gestured toward the clerk. The lights dimmed slightly as a screen lit up behind the witness stand. "Exhibit A," he said. Body camera footage from the night of the arrest. The video began to play. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence as the images appeared. Marcus stepping out of his car, hands visible, voice calm. Then the officers pushing him against the hood, snapping the cuffs, laughing. The sound of rain, the cruel tone of their amusement, every detail played out like a confession. Marcus's voice never wavered. "At no point did I resist. At no point did I act with aggression. You will note that both officers drew their weapons before I made any movement." The defense attorney tried to object, but the evidence drowned his words. The video ended. Marcus signaled for the next file. Exhibit B text messages appeared on the screen, recovered from Bennett's phone. The audience gasped as the words appeared in full view. Bennett, "Got another one. Thought he could play judge?" Davis, "Judge Dredd, more like it. I am the law." Haha. Marcus let the silence stretch. "This is the respect my profession receives from the very people sworn to uphold the law." He turned toward the officers. "Officer Bennett, Officer Davis, explain to this court why you found it amusing to arrest a man you suspected of being innocent." Bennett swallowed hard. "We didn't know who you were, sir. So if I had not been a judge," Marcus said evenly, "this would have been acceptable?" Bennett's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked helplessly toward his attorney. Marcus shifted his gaze to Davis. "Do you believe civil rights apply only to those with titles? With power? Or do they apply to every citizen?" Davis couldn't meet his eyes. We made a mistake." Marcus nodded slowly. "No, you made a choice. A choice that others before you made because they knew they could. Until now." From the back row, someone began clapping softly. It spread through the room until the gallery was filled with applause that the bailiff struggled to quiet. Marcus raised his hand, and silence returned. "This isn't about applause," he said. "This is about accountability." He motioned for the clerk again. "The court has identified 27 similar cases involving these officers. Every victim a person of color. Every complaint dismissed. Every injustice buried." Packets were distributed through the room, photographs, affidavits, and internal memos. Faces and names of people who had been ignored for years now stared up from the pages. Marcus's voice grew stronger. "Justice cannot depend on who you are. Justice must depend on what is right." The defense attorney rose again, desperate. "Your Honor, you're crossing the line between law and vengeance." Marcus met his gaze. "Vengeance is personal. Justice is public." He turned to the clerk. "Enter all exhibits into evidence. Effective immediately, Officers Bennett and Davis are suspended pending criminal prosecution." The defense attorney shouted, "Objection." But the gavel struck before he could finish. "Overruled," Marcus said, his tone final. The evidence speaks louder than excuses. The courtroom fell into a deep silence. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Marcus looked out at the faces in the gallery, the people whose faith in justice had been tested too many times. "This is not about me," he said quietly. "It's about every person who has been made to feel small, voiceless, or invisible in the face of power. This courtroom belongs to them as much as it does to any judge, lawyer, or officer." He paused. The blindfold on Lady Justice was never meant to make her ignorant. It was meant to make her equal. The gavel came down once more, echoing through the room like a promise. As the crowd erupted again, Marcus sat still for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. He didn't feel triumphant, only resolute. For the first time in his career, justice didn't feel abstract. It felt human. That night, when the courthouse emptied and the headlines began to spread across the city, Marcus remained in his chambers, watching the lights of downtown flicker through the window. On television screens everywhere, his name filled the news. People debated, protested, celebrated. The country was paying attention. He took off his robe and hung it carefully on its hook. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, the same man who once believed the system couldn't fail him. Now he knew better. There was still one more thing left to do. The following morning, sunlight broke across the city like a revelation. Newspapers carried the story on every front page. Talk shows dissected every angle. Some called Judge Marcus Reed a hero. Others called him reckless. But no one ignored him anymore. In the courthouse, the air buzzed differently. Colleagues who once greeted him with polite smiles now stopped to shake his hand. Others avoided eye contact entirely, afraid of what his courage said about their silence. That afternoon, Judge Eleanor Grant walked into his chambers carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her silver hair framed a face that had seen decades of courtroom battles. She handed him one of the cups. "You've set this city on fire," she said with a half-smile. "Sometimes fire is the only way to cleanse what's rotten," Marcus replied. She sat down, studying him carefully. "They're saying you've changed everything. The department's reopening cases. The DA's forming a review committee." He nodded slowly. "Change always starts small. A single crack in the wall." Eleanor sipped her coffee. "But cracks spread." "They're supposed to," he said. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the city faint beyond the window. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something unfamiliar, a quiet sense of hope. Not the blind optimism of speeches or slogans, but a steady belief that the truth once spoken couldn't be buried again. As dusk settled, he finally returned his daughter's missed call. Her voice came through the phone, trembling with relief. "Dad, it's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. You did something incredible," he smiled softly. "I did what was right. They suspended those officers, didn't they?" "They did. And there's more coming." A pause. "I'm proud of you." Her words landed gently, but they filled the empty space inside him that the law never could. "I'm proud of you too," he said. "Keep studying hard. The system needs more of us who remember what justice feels like." 2 months later, the courtroom filled again, this time for the trial of Officers Bennett and Davis. The nation watched as evidence poured out. Videos, messages, testimonies from victims who finally found their voices. The defense fought hard, but truth fought harder. When the verdict was read, guilty on multiple counts, the reaction outside the courthouse was unlike anything the city had seen. People didn't cheer for vengeance. They cheered for balance. For the first time, accountability had a face. Inside his office, Marcus sat in quiet reflection. His robe hung neatly on its stand, the symbol of a system that had tried to betray him but which he refused to abandon. He knew justice wasn't fixed overnight. It was a long, slow repair that demanded courage, one decision at a time. Months passed. Reforms rolled through the department. Officers were retrained. The city council approved a new community oversight board. Old cases once dismissed were reopened. 17 wrongful convictions overturned. 17 names cleared. Marcus attended every hearing he could, not as a judge, but as a man determined to see the work through. He shook hands with victims. He listened to their stories. He reminded them that justice wasn't a privilege, it was a promise. One evening, he stood before a crowded community center. The seats were filled with faces from every corner of the city. Young, old, hopeful, skeptical. He spoke plainly, without notes, without ceremony. Justice isn't automatic, he said. It's something we build together or not at all. It begins with knowing your rights, but it grows when you demand that those rights be honored. I believed the law could protect everyone. I was wrong. The law doesn't protect anyone until we make it do so. Applause rose and faded, replaced by a deep, thoughtful silence. After the meeting, as the crowd dispersed, a young woman approached him. She looked nervous but determined. "Judge Reed," she said, "my brother was arrested last year. They said he resisted. He didn't, nobody believed us. But after what you did, I'm studying law now. I want to fight back the right way." He looked at her for a moment and smiled, seeing in her the reflection of every person who ever refused to stay silent. "That's how it starts," he said. One voice that decides not to be ignored. Later that night, as he walked to his car, a patrol cruiser slowed beside him. The officer rolled down the window. "Evening, sir," the young man said politely. "Your taillight's out. Just wanted to let you know." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Thank you, officer. I'll have it fixed tomorrow." "No ticket tonight," the officer said, tapping his active body camera. "Department policy." Marcus nodded once, watching the cruiser drive away. The faint glow of the body cam light lingered in his mind. Proof that even small things can change when the world starts paying attention. When he reached home, a letter waited on his desk. It bore the seal of the Department of Justice. Inside, it confirmed what he already suspected: the investigation was complete. The department was found guilty of systemic misconduct. Reforms would become law, and beneath that, a list: 17 names of men and women whose wrongful convictions had been overturned. He sat back, reading each name slowly, as if speaking them aloud would return the time they had lost. Then he looked at the photo on his desk: his father in robes, his daughter in her graduation gown, and in the middle himself, no longer just a judge, but a man who had forced justice to look in the mirror. He whispered to the empty room, "The system isn't perfect, but it's changing." Outside, the night was quiet. On the street, another car was pulled over, but this time the voices were calm, respectful. A small sign of something larger, something earned. Marcus closed his eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time in a long while, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Justice had seen him, and now at last she was starting to see everyone.